Okay. Hello, everybody. This is Bart Bettiga, publisher of Tile Letter Magazine, executive director of the National Tile Contractors Association. I'm extremely honored and excited to have with you all today a very special guest. This is none other than my predecessor, the former executive director or executive director emeritus of the National Tile Contractors Association, Mr. Joe Tarver. Joe was executive director of NTCA from 1972 until 2002. And we, of course, at NTCA are celebrating our 75th anniversary as a leading trade association. NTCA was established in 1947. And so we are at 75 years here in 2022. Joe, since I succeeded you in 2002, my anniversary is right now pending. It will be 20 years on February 1st. So that means we've been leading NTCA for 50 years. How do you feel about that?
Makes me feel old.
Me too. That's what I was thinking. But you've been involved with NTCA for well over a half a century. You know, when we talk about 75 years, you know, a lot, my experience has been in the past 20. A lot of our members have known kind of NTCA, you know, some of them in the past 5 to 10 years, some of them beyond that. But give us a little historical perspective of the association, what it means to you to see NTCA celebrate 75 years. And what do you think our impact as an association has been on the tile industry?
Well, Bart, we got to go back a little bit before actually the beginning of the association, because when I got into the tile industry in 1957, the association was only 10 years old. And that really makes me feel old. But the association started as a breakaway group from the Tile Contractors Association of America in 1947 in Birmingham, Alabama, moved to Jackson, Mississippi shortly thereafter. It's been there ever since. I joined the association after 14 years in tile manufacturing in 1972. And we were in an old rat and roach infested building in West Jackson, and a small 13-state regional association, and had no assets. It did have, thanks to my predecessor, a $100,000 CD, and that was the total assets of the Southern Tile Contractors Association, and one of those being the desk that you're sitting at now. The other was a secretarial desk, an IBM typewriter with about a half a dozen different fonts that we published tile letter with. And from there, in 1973, I enclosed the garage of my home on Voorhees Street in Jackson. And that was our office until 1975. I bought a home in North Jackson and had a large game room. So we continued to operate out of my house from 1975 to 1978. And at that time, we bought land where you are sitting now. And 1979, at the Easter flood, it was under 3 feet of water. But we didn't let that discourage us. In early 1980, we filled the lot to the flood level or the flood plain and began construction of the building, and actually moved into it in 1980. Since that time, we've operated out of the building, and the history of the association goes on.
That's great. Tell me about what you think would be some milestones over the years, significant changes of the industry and the role NTCA played. For example, I think you mentioned to me recently, when you were executive director, what type of products were out there, what mortars were out there, grouts, things of that nature. What do you think has been significant, and what has NTCA's role been there?
Well, again, we go back in history, Bart, because when I started in 1957, the industry was at a point of a conversion. We look at the 1940s, contractors were kings. There was no method of installation other than a conventional mortar bed. No thin sets, no thin bed products at all. In late 1957, the conversion began. There were a few mastics adhesives out there that people installed tile over sheetrock and green board and wood and just about any other substrate that you could think of. But at that same time, several people were working on dry set mortars, and the two people that really started it was Dr. Vince Fitzgerald, who at that time was executive director of Tile Council of America, and another gentleman, Herman Wagner, who was a chemist in New York. They actually developed and patented dry set mortar formulas, but they didn't work. They ultimately saw no value. I knew Vince personally and talked to him several times while this was all in process. So he and Herman decided they had no value, so they gave those formulas to Tile Council of America. At the same time, two gentlemen, Gene Kaiser with the C.E. Kaiser Company and Bill Love with L&M Serco, were working on dry set mortar formulas. The problem with dry set mortar, or thin sets as they're called as well, is they have no water retentive agents and they have no adhesive qualities. These were the early formulas. We got to thank Bill Love for getting sick, because he went into a pharmacy and with a prescription, and while it was being filled, he saw the pharmacist working with a powdered product, adding water to it, and a pestle, and it just continued to, emulsify and grow. So Bill, with his curiosity, asked the pharmacist about it, found out it was methicel, and so he obtained some samples of it and started adding it to the dry set mortar. It worked. So now we've got three elements of the four needed for a successful thin set mortar. We've got the sand, cement in the proper ratios. We've got the methicel to retain the water. Until that point, the dry set mortar was no better than a mortar bed because it drew the water out of the substrate, and the tile still had to be soaked before you could install it. The other part of it came when Dr. Henry Rothberg Sr. was experimenting with latexes, and he had developed a liquid latex, and between the three gentlemen, they ultimately came up with a formula that contained all three elements: the sand, the cement, the methicel for water retention, and the latex, which has an adhesive quality. So that began the conversion of the tile industry and set it off on a journey that all of us have been absolutely amazed by.
How about backer board? Tell me a little bit about the role NTCA played in as backer board as we evolved from mud walls to the backer board installations.
Well, my good friend Paul Dinkle, at this same time in the late 50s and early 60s, invented Wonderboard, which is the first cementitious backer board. It has a cementitious core pre-stressed on both sides with fiberglass mesh, and it gave you a substrate equivalent to a conventional mortar bed. And that was the first step in backer boards. Of course, there's a multitude of them on the market today, but still the cementitious backer board represents a true cementitious substrate for ceramic tile on walls and floors.
So that leads me to the workshop program. NTCA has become known as a training entity. We went on the road for many years providing workshops. I think Paul Dinkle participated with you, and NTCA played a role in introducing new technology, but also providing awareness of industry standards, and even visiting proper best practices on the basics of installations, from grouting to epoxies to and cementitious grouts, as well as proper installation of shower pans, and I could go on and on. Give us a little bit of history of the NTCA workshop program and how it got to where it is today.
All right, I'm going to step back just a moment, Bart, in that during this period of the tile industry, it was actually an industry of some 40 plus small, mostly family-owned manufacturers, and your product selection at that time was 4¼ inch bright glaze, white bodied wall tile. And
gray and white grout, right? About 2 or 3 grout colors.
yeah. Black and white, basically, but there were a few patterns of ceramic mosaics that were put together with 1x1, 1x2, and 2x2 ceramic mosaics. There was not the selection of products out there. So, but at any rate, moving on to the workshops, that worked really hand in glove with the NTCA technical committee. In 1985, I restructured the technical committee. Up until that time, we had an advisory committee made up of manufacturers and some distributors, but we didn't really have an active contractor based technical committee. So that was formed, and out of that came enough information and products for us to begin a workshop program. And about that same time, actually in 85, 86, I convinced the executive committee to buy a motorhome and a cargo trailer. So I went in with the cargo trailer and inside and put shelves and all of the necessary interior to take everything that we needed to conduct a workshop program. We started off, I had 2 4x8 stages and had pipe legs, and we put that together, and we had 60 folding chairs. We had a big attic fan that I enclosed because most of the workshops were held in a warehouse environment. And then the shelves contained all of the grouts, mortars, epoxies, everything that we needed to do a workshop program. The workshop itself, we started off doing 5 shows a week, and ultimately reduced that to 4. But the people that helped me in all of the workshops, including Paul Dinkle, Lee Hightower, Steve Young, even Rick Wood with Ladder Creed, several other people that were constantly there, that were made up virtually all of them. But we went into the distributor warehouse, set up the meeting area, and had an hour of food for the attendees. And then we covered over time. We changed it from time to time with the workshops, but as you mentioned, we instructed the people on virtually all of the product methods of that particular time, with epoxies. We had a table that we displayed all of the latest tools, and then we were, I guess, about 3 hours was generally our time limit. We'd get out with the program ending in about 3 hours, and then take us an hour to break down and load up. Then we drive 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to make the next location. And we did that Monday through Friday. And the guys that work with me, I would leave on Sunday and drive to the first location. They would meet me there. Then we all stayed in the motorhome until the end of the Thursday night program. And then Friday, I got them to the airport, and then I had to drive back to Jackson.
It's incredible. So you were doing that workshop program, in addition to being the executive director. So you were wearing many hats at the time, that's for sure.
It was a stressful time because not only did I have to run the association, we had a convention and exposition and the workshops, and then the other meetings, of course, our executive committee board meetings and the technical committee meetings.
So one of the things that came out of the workshops, or as part of the workshops, was, what later became known as trial and error, or directional trawling. In some parts of the world, it actually became known as the Tarver method, which is pretty cool and a big honor to you. But certainly many people played a role in the discovery of proper troweling. And I think you used clear plexiglass in your testing and then in your demonstrations. Tell us about how that all happened.
We did, Bart. We used acrylics in the workshop program, but I had a lot of tables in the back room of the office where you're sitting, and that's where I put together 4x4 Wonderboard demonstration modules that generally had quarry tile on it, but we did sometimes put ceramic mosaics and other products. But I went locally and had 2 24-inch pieces of glass, 1/2 inch thick, cut for me. And in my spare time, quote unquote, I had all of the manufacturers supplied us with all of the products. So I had mortars and grouts in the back storage room, and I experimented with different dry set mortars and different dry set grouts. And simultaneously, I was working with Marshalltown Trowel in Arkansas, and they had advanced the thought of making an oval trowel. So they did, and I had prototypes of those that we used in the workshop. But Marshalltown came up with the first oval shaped trowels. But I was working one night, and I just, no matter how I tried with trowels, with different formulations, different consistencies of dry set mortar, I could never get on large size tiles, and particularly 24-inch. I could never get more than 40 to 45, maybe 60% coverage. And of course, I didn't meet industry standards. So I had enough mortar left. I didn't want to just throw it away, so I decided I'd just make a pass, you know. So I troweled the mortar and put the 24-inch glass on it and moved it forward, backward, and I had 95% coverage. I had no idea what I'd done. I was astonished to begin with, but I had no explanation for it. So I cleaned up everything, went home. I woke up early the next morning and I said, I think I know what I did. So I got to the office. I started again with mix of mortar and troweled in one direction, moved the tile perpendicular to it, and I got the 90 to 95, sometimes 100% coverage. It was all accidental. I didn't do it on purpose. I had no idea that was going to work. But the theory is, and it does work, is that if you trowel with a figure-8 motion, then you have trowel ridges that cross. And at the intersection of those trowel ridges, you've got a greater mass of mortar than you do in a straight line. And the ends of the open channel of the grout ridges, the mortar ridges, allows the air to escape. So with the oval trowels that Marshalltown had provided, it just made common sense that the mortar would disperse a lot quicker in one straight line with no intersections, no dissimilar masses of mortar, and the air could get out. So it's easier to disperse a mortar ridge with one flat and one oval surface than it is two flat surfaces. So those are all of the elements that make that method work.
That's just a great historical perspective on trial and error, which is you originally produced it. You originally demonstrated it on the road, then you produced it in a VHS video, and then we later put it in a CD. Then we made it into an MP4, and we've reproduced that video to make it more modern. And now it receives thousands and thousands of views on many YouTube channels, not only NTCA's, but other manufacturers that share it. So congratulations to that. Speaking of that, then, related to the technical committee that you mentioned, which really was the beginning of reorganizing that group and having them and getting some of the volunteers involved in the workshops. The technical committee basically became responsible for, and is today responsible for, the development and maintenance of the NTCA reference manual. Tell us about that document and its importance, and why you feel that's been such a big member benefit, and how has that impacted the tile industry from a perspective of growth, if you will.
Let me quickly touch on the trial and error.
Sure.
Bob Robertson, of course, was chairman of the technical committee for a number of years, beginning in 1985. And Bob, once I developed that method, I asked Bob Robertson and Bob Young, two of our industry legends and icons, to field test it, which they did. And then Bob called me and he said, I've got a film company here in Raleigh, and I want to make a video of that. So I flew up there and we went to their studio, and Bob had all of necessary materials there. And we actually filmed and finished that first trial and error video in one day. And when we were working with it, the young man that was actually doing the troweling just got frustrated because he'd trowel and we'd place a tile. We were using a tile and not acrylic. And when we lifted the tile, we didn't have the coverage. And so we made about 4 attempts at it. And I had sat down in a chair facing the board that they were working on. And he started troweling, and I saw the deflection because the wonder board didn't have enough strength to withstand the movement of a 1/2-inch sheet of plywood under it. So I said, well, stop. We reinforced that to stop the deflection, and then immediately we got the results. And we did a little more testing on some concrete substrates in Bob's warehouse. And that at that point, we realized, along with Paul Dinkle, that the wonder board is not structurally sound. It will deflect. So you have to have a good foundation for the wonder board if you're using it particularly on a horizontal surface. Okay, back to the work of the technical committee. Again, Bob accepted the chairmanship of that committee in 1985, and his wife Phoebe actually worked as the secretary for the technical committee for a number of years. And we started off with 25 members, and we didn't have visitors. I mean, it was pretty much a closed meeting at that point in time. But we had the same mix. We had manufacturers, we had couple of distributors, we had manufacturers representatives, and then contractors. But we tried to single out and highlight methods of installation in the industry that was causing problems. And then we would attack that problem on the basis of what caused it, how you could cure it, and then how you could prevent it. So that became the basis of the reference manual, the cause, cure, prevention. And I had no idea at that time of a reference manual, but for the committee, I would bring the minutes back with me and then begin to put them in some order that we could address that particular problem, or maybe more than one problem, at the next meeting. So that's how the reference manual started. It was a work in progress for the technical committee. And I actually was doing it for their benefit, but then I realized this was something that could be much greater than just a technical committee a project. So Myra Cardwell, who 37-year employee of NTCA, and I designed the form that is currently used today in the cause, cure, prevention. And I started putting that together after each meeting, and we put it first into a little 3-ring binder and loose leaf. So that was the beginning of the reference manual. And as we progressed with it, we realized that there was some additional things that we needed to do in the way of letters to help contractors, white papers that would be explanatory rather than just a cause, cure, prevention program. So that was the beginning of it, and now I guess it's 200 pages or so.
It's a couple hundred pages. It's been converted to Spanish and used in countries that speak Spanish, and we have relationships with Australia and Canada to have the reference manual disseminated and used by associations in those respective countries. So I believe the reference manual is handcuffed and used considerably along with the TCNA handbook and the ANSI standards. It was a wonderful member benefit for many years. Several years ago, we decided that it was such an important document that we made it available to everyone, members and non-members. Members get special pricing, but non-members have access to it as well. You can now get it, as you said, in a couple hundred-page book that we mail, or you can get a downloadable PDF. So very, very valuable. All right, just to move along, a lot of people are not aware of this. I mean, most people that are involved with NTCA know that NTCA is a major sponsor and partner in coverings, one of the largest trade shows in the United States, certainly the largest tile and stone show in North America. Give us a little bit of the background. A lot of people don't know that the NTCA convention kind of led to what today is covering. Share with us a little bit of that history.
Well, I'm very proud of the fact that NTCA for 37 years had the largest exposition of anybody in the tile industry. The tile manufacturers had never had an exposition. So in got to get my dates here, in 1980, CTDA was actually formed in 85. 86, they had their first exposition. I had a workshop in Las Vegas in 1986, and Henry Kroom, who was the president of CTDA at that time, invited me to come into the CTDA board meeting. And that's where I made my first presentation to CTDA. Quickly moving from there, we had several other meetings, and in 1986, we formed Tile Expo. And that was the beginning of the consolidation of associations in the industry, as well as our foreign partners. But the first Tile Expo was in 1987 in Orlando, and NTCA had already booked the Peabody Hotel there for a show, and we couldn't get out of it because of the cancellation fees and so forth. So to move along quickly, we held both shows. Both of them were extremely successful. And then later we had two more shows, one in Dallas and one in San Francisco. And at that same time, incidentally, backing up a moment, when we formed Tile Expo, I convinced our executive committee to insist on including Tile Council of America in the Tile Expo partnership. So we started at the same time negotiating with World Exposition of Ceramic Tile and Bathroom Furnishings, which was owned by the tile manufacturers of Spain, the tile manufacturers of Italy. We had our first meeting actually in Orlando during that 1987 Tile Expo meeting. We met again in Italy a couple of times. I think David Knox was president of CTDA at the time, and he and I made those trips. They were contentious. And I'm going to explain quickly without taking a lot of time. The tile contractors were not accepted by the Europeans because they at that particular time, and even now, don't have a lot of tile contractors. So they were put out by having to deal with the installing segment of our tile industry. But We prevailed, we kept negotiating, and we finally convinced them of the value of the tile contractor, and particularly that they were not going to be successful in the United States without the tile contracting community. And so that being said, we met again at the Tile Expo convention exposition in San Francisco, and our next meeting was in New York in September of 1988. And it's strange with all of these meetings that we had, we would come to an agreement and then we'd leave. And then 2 days later, we would get a message, a text, or a telephone call that, well, we didn't do this, or we didn't cover this, or this we didn't know about. So I had my computer and I had the agreement in the computer that we had developed up to that point. When we met in New York, we came to an agreement. Everybody was agreed this was going to happen. And so they said, well, we'll go home. I said, no, we're not going home. I've got the agreement. I've made all of the changes that we have talked about and approved today. I've got a little printer. So you guys go have lunch. And when you come back, I'll have a copy of the complete agreement. We're going to sign it before we leave this room. We did. And I guess yeah, we had the last meeting in 1999 in Atlanta, and we ratified the agreement, and we put out a notice to the industry at that time that we had agreed on an international tile and stone exposition. And so it stayed that way until I can't remember exactly, but stayed International Tile and Stone Exposition until we changed it over to covering. So that's where we are today with that.
That's great. And what a historical walk down memory lane with that. And as one that's involved with the Coverings Board of Directors, you know, we are very much honored that we have a seat at that table. And I believe the NTCA plays a significant role in the value of that show and putting on educational events and educational conferences, and a lot of our members really get a lot of value out of attending that show, and from the networking component and getting able to meet the manufacturers and the distributors in person at events like that. So it's wonderful that you were involved in that. So, you know, as we kind of near the end of this interview, I would ask, you know, for a long time, you and Myra were basically the staff of NTCA. You've watched, you know, you hired me, and and the board brought me in, and you've kind of watched us evolve. You know, even today, you know, we're an association of, you know, 1,600 to 1,700 members, but we still only have 13, 14 employees. An association is only as good as the active involvement of its members. What about NTCA, in your observations, made us special in the sense that we were able to get our members so involved and engaged in the association?
I think, Bart, when I was hired by Bob Robertson and Brandon Murray in 1971, or actually early 1972, I had two things that I would insist upon. That number one is the absolute dedication to professional training for the installation of all industry products, and where that could take place and we could afford to do it, that we would provide that service to the industry. And I came with the association out of manufacturing, and it was a tough decision to make. And I had a lot of wakeless nights while I was considering this, because not only the association had no assets, it had $100,000 CD. That was the total value of it. It served a 13 state area. And my second important consideration was that I wanted to make it into a national association, and that I wanted their backing to do that. That has never failed. And that I took a huge cut in pay to come with the association, and I did it on the premise that I'd be glad to make the sacrifices in the beginning. And Bob and Brannon committed that they'd make sure that once we grew and the association could afford it, they'd take care of me, and they have. The association has been very good to me, and obviously it not only grew to be a national association, it's an international entity. So the value of the association to the industry is its dedication to training and education for the professional installation of all of our industry products. And the other was the tile letter, which was a rag sheet when I came in 1972, and Dow Tile helped us with the first color covers and color content inside. So we made it into a professional publication. And as far as I'm concerned, it's still the premier copy magazine in the tile industry. And those were the things that put NTCA on the map. And the other was obviously the reference manual, and all of the participation by NTCA personnel and every committee in our industry. NTCA is a premier association, not only in the domestic market, but it's recognized internationally. And again, I'm prejudiced, but I think it's the premier association in the makeup of coverings.
Yeah, that's really well said, and very much appreciated. But like you, I've been able to participate in some international meetings with other labor organizations and trade associations. And 201, we are continuously recognized, as an association to aspire to be like, as an association that has tile fixers, as they're known in other parts of the world, and tile contractors respected with a seat at the table with manufacturers and distributors. And so, our impact internationally has been, significant, and that is something that I know you and I am extremely proud of. And then you touched on Tile Letter Magazine, which you are a guest here on an upcoming Tile Letter issue, as well as our 75th anniversary issue. And it's ironic you mentioned Dow Tile in the sense that they've been a partner, as well as many other supporters and manufacturers, for many years. But Dow Tile is also celebrating a 75th year anniversary at the same time that NTCA is. And so that was significant. But again, I really appreciate the chance to reminisce with you, talk about the role of the National Tile Contractors Association in the tile industry. You've been listening to Joe Tarver, Executive Director Emeritus of the NTCA from 1972 to 2002. And Joe, thank you so much. I tell you, your memory is uncanny. Your walk down memory lane is so much appreciated, and I hope that 20 years from now I can do the same for somebody that asks me to share the role of NTCA. So thanks again.
I'd like to close with this, Bart, and I want to read it because I wrote it quite a while ago, and I want to make sure I get it exactly right. You mentioned Myra and I and the early tough going, and I truly believe that without the considerable sacrifices, that the long hours, the dedication to, and the passion for the goals and principles and our industry as a whole, by me and Myra Cardwell, NTCA would not be the association that it is today. I know that's a little egotistical. However, I want to continue.
But it's true.
My successor and good friend, Bart Bettiga, the current executive director of the National Tile Contractors Association since 2002, assistant executive director Jim Olson, and the entire NTCA staff continue to move the association to higher levels of member services, value to the industry through participation on all major committees, maintaining Tile Letter as the premier publication in the industry, recognizing, recording, and developing solutions for technical problems through the NTCA Technical Committee, the NTCA Reference Manual, and a major influence in the success of coverings. I'm indebted to the officers, board of directors, committees, staff, and members for their passion, dedication, participation, and services for furthering the important work of the National Tile Contractors Association, which I have been so privileged to be a part of.
Thank you, Joe. That means a lot. And I feel the same way. Very privileged to be a part of this industry. And I know that you were involved in manufacturing and I was involved in distribution. And I know that I speak for you to say that it's really gratifying to work in the world of an association that serves its members. It's a uniquely different experience than involved in sale of tile or distribution of tile, for sure. So thanks again for being our guest, and you have a wonderful day, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much, Bart.
You've been listening to Joe Tarver. This is Bart Bettiga, publisher of Tile Letter and executive director of NTCA. Thank you so much. Have a great day.